back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today we're going to continue the hunting knife sheath that has the dragon scales on it, and we're actually going to put the spacer in it today. So come on in and let's get started. Alright, so what I've got today is I've got the front of my sheath that has my dragon scales on it. It's been dyed front and back. I've got my spacer. It's about 1/4 of an inch wide, same thickness as my front and back leather. It's about 9 ounce, so 8 to 10, I would say. And what I'm going to be using today is some weldwood contact cement. Now in the past I've used Gorilla Glue contact cement and it works great. Never had any problems with it, but this one actually has its own brush built into it, and it seems to work really well. I used it on a couple of projects so far, and I like it. So that's what I'm going to use today on this one. So what I'll do is make sure that I have my pieces in the right position. I'm going to want to put contact cement on my front piece, just where the spacer is going to make contact. And you could mark that if you want to, but I know this is 1/4 inch wide, so I'll just stay within that 1/4 inch margin all the way around. Then I need to take my spacer and lay it on here, and then get it in the right position, and then rotate it over. So I'm rotating it over so that I make sure I get my contact cement on the right side of my spacer. Then when it's dried, then I can roll it back over, position it, and then I always put some weight on that for several hours and let that make real good contact. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to make sure that my spacer is adhered to my front before I go putting any holes in it, because I want all my holes to line up through my spacer. So instead of punching or drilling holes in my front piece, then my spacer, then my back piece, and trying to line all that up, I'm going to actually glue this spacer to the front, and then when I make my holes, I know they'll be all the way through and they'll be matched up. So first thing I'm going to do is open up my contact cement, and I'm going to start applying that to my spacer, and I'm just putting it on the one side, and this stuff I notice seems to dry fairly quickly. So I try to, and you want it air dried before you make contact with your other piece, but I try to move fairly quickly when I'm applying this. And I don't want it running all over the place, but I am giving it a fair, liberal amount to make sure that I do have plenty of adhesive so that I get really good contact. Alright, so that's coated all the way around, and I can see that it's already drying. Now I'm going to take my front piece. I'm going to do it a little bit differently, since I know I just want to coat that 1/4 inch So basically, I'm just kind of scraping off on the edge and then backing my brush up just a hair until I'm right at a 1/4 inch. And I'm just visually doing that. I did not make any marks on here. You can if you want, or you could put some painter's tape around that so that you make sure you don't get any in a spot you don't want contact cement on. But most of your contact cements like this, if you get it in a spot that you don't want it, let it dry and just rub on it with your finger or your thumb and it'll roll right off. It's pretty forgiving as long as you don't make contact with it. Now once you've bonded those pieces together, it holds really strong, so it's pretty tough stuff. You can see I'm moving pretty quickly, and I'm trying not to get way too much glue because I don't want it dripping down on the edge of my piece. And any mistakes that you would make on over gluing or anything, they're going to be hidden because this is the inside of the sheath. Alright, so that one's coated. The spacer is almost, you could tell by looking at it, it's almost dry. And what I'll do is I'll put a piece of cardboard, hard cardboard, on top of that once I put them together, and then I'll put weight on top of that. I'll probably use my granite that I do my stamping on. I'll probably use that piece of granite because it's really dense and heavy, and that'll make good contact with that. Let me turn this one around. Let's let this air dry, and then I'll come back and show you what the next step is. Alright, now this is fairly dry. I'm going to rotate my spacer back over, and I'm going to start on the point down here and my straight edge, or the backbone, and I'm just lining that edge up and pushing that down, just putting a little bit of pressure on it. To make sure it's got good contact. Then I'll come around to the other side and start working the knife blade edge around, because this has been sitting for a while after it's been cut and dyed, so I'm basically, as I contact this together, I'm reshaping it to match the shape of the sheath. And once, like I said, once it makes contact, it's gonna stay, especially once we put some pressure on it for a few hours. It's not gonna move. So I like to push it into position, get it where it goes, and then I like to take my mallet and just lightly tap it. And what that's doing is that tapping is pressing individual spots as I tap, and that's making real good contact between those two pieces. So I like to do that. Then I want to go through, rotate it over, and I want to inspect my edge. I want to make sure my edge matches up. on my spacer and my sheath. And at this point, you might be able to make small adjustments. You can see a little bit of that glue coming out of there. Don't worry about it. See, I can take my finger and rub on that, and it'll just roll right off. Don't worry about that. It'll come off. And I'll leave that until it totally dries. So I'm going to lay that down, and it doesn't really matter whether it's spacer side up or the front of the sheath up. I'm going to take another piece of cardboard, lay it on top. Then I'm going to take my piece of granite and lay it down smooth side down, right on top of that. And I'll just leave that alone for several hours. Probably, to be honest with you, I probably won't even touch this till tomorrow. And this is still mid-morning, so probably 24 hours. You don't have to leave it that long. I'm not sure. Let's see. Let dry until glossy, 15 minutes, but not over 2 hours. So once you've let it dry for that long and you've already made contact, then that says you're good to go. But I like to leave that pressure on there at least overnight, and then it'll be ready to go tomorrow for sure. That way I don't have any doubts, I don't have any problems with it, or at least I never have in the past. Alright, so that's the next step in the hunting knife sheath with the dragon scales on it. Come on back next week and we'll be moving on to actually putting this whole piece together, doing some stitching and making some holes in it. So I appreciate you coming and watching. As I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.